So, gonna report on my findings from my research into the customer base in terms of the sales, in terms of the different demographics that make up the sales and stuff of that nature. Just to get started, we're going to take a look at this dashboard that has a number of graphs, and I'm going to go through each graph one by one and what it shows and what it represents, so we can get a better picture of what's going on. This one, this graph just kind of shows in terms of the total sales, the breakdown between the marital status of those sales. And as we can see, the single, the married is in the blue, and the yellow is preferred not to say. Single people make up the overwhelming majority of the sales, so that lets us know that single people are the ones that are majority of the customers that are buying the most often and buying the most as well. Um, as we can see here, in terms of like the average sales from marital status, it's a little bit more picture as opposed to the first graph that showed the total sales. This one shows the average sales, and the single people, as we see, prefer not to say on average, spend more on average. So this graph doesn't really tell us too much in terms of like our customer base, but it does show that on average, the prefer not to say spends a little bit more than the single, and the married, and the singles still spend a little bit more on average than the married people. But I would say that because of these two graphs, you can see that the total sales give us a more clearer picture as to like who's doing the bulk of the buying, and in terms of our customer demographics. The next graph shows the income status of those who spend the most. As we can see, those with no income spend more than those with 10,000 to 25,000 income, and those between 25 and 50, and those between 50 and more than 50, and those under 10,000. So as we see, just the no income alone makes up more than the two highest, which would be 25,000 to 50,000, and 50,000 above. Combined is still less than the no income. So people with no income seems to be the bulk of of our purchasing, and in terms of that as well. So people with no income buy the most, see the most of our sales. Our next graph shows the sales, a pie chart that shows the sales split between the two genders, between male and females. We can see male has more than $100,000 more in terms of overall sales than the females. So we can see the majority of what people buying is the males, single, no income. So as we can see, those are what we're seeing so far. The next one shows the sales, the average sales by date. I use average on this one just to kind of see the general trend in terms of our sales, and it seems like it doesn't go too high or too low, but at its peak it's in August, and it goes down to from August to September. That's the lowest. That's the biggest change that we see. Um, but besides that, on average, everything seems pretty consistent. It doesn't get too high, it doesn't get too low. So we can see on average sales by date. The date doesn't really make a difference in terms of like month. The months don't really make a difference in terms of like the sales, how it's looking really. In terms of sales by education, we see that graduate and postgraduate are the bulk of our sales. So I would say like I guess students that are graduate and postgraduate seems to be the bulk of our sales, high up like up here, whereas people are uneducated in school or PhD are kind of down here. So the bulk of our sales are graduate and postgraduate students. As we see in the next graph, the average sale by age, that's lowest with 19 and 20 and 21, gets a little higher, and it peaks around 22, 23. 24, 25 is still pretty high, and then it starts to go gradually back down until like lower ages into the high high 20s and early 30s. It goes back down, but as we can see, 22, 23, and 24 and 25 year olds are pretty much the bulk of our sales. By occupation, we can see down it kind of backs up what we've seen by in terms of education as well. Students, post grad and graduate students in particular, as we can see from our previous graph, are the bulk of our sales, whereas those with W-2 employees are the second most, self-employed third most, and housewives being marginal into comparison to everybody else. Usually that usually means that housewives are usually more doing more cooking at home as opposed to ordering food. So that's pretty consistent with some of our previous assumptions as well. As we can see, students make up the majority of our sales, so much so that even if you combine the rest of them together, they still don't match up to what the students are paying in occupation. So it's very interesting for us to see. And then the last chart we're seeing is the sales by family chart, size rather. Well, is the most between 2 and 3 people are the highest we see in terms of family size, which could make much more sense, right? If you're buying for a family, especially if you're a wife and husband, wife, and a child, you'd have to buy more food and stuff in nature. So why three would be make sense. 2 and 3, so multiple people in the household would definitely make a lot more sense. So that those charts make sense. As we can see from this dashboard, that both single people, males, people with no income, as well as students, as we can see over here, post grad and graduate students, and and between the ages of 22 and 25. So students between the ages of 22 and 25 that are single and have no income make up the majority of our sales, which is pretty consistent. So students that have no income that are between the ages of 22 and 25, post graduate students that are single are the number one people making up the bulk of our sales. So I would say some strategies, that's pretty much my conclusion, some strategy that could be implemented in order to kind of, help with the sales and more consistency would probably just be to reward our, I guess, students. So providing discounts for them and stuff of that nature, as well as some reward points, will kind of bolster how much students are buying, since they're the majority of our buyers anyway. So this would favor them and which would encourage them to buy more. Another thing that could be done as well is provide new students with discounts as well. They maybe show their ID or something like that. That would encourage more students to become buyers, because as we can see, they're the bulk of our purchasing anyway. So if we get more students, then it should increase as well. Another thing we could do, go offer memberships to our customers and point systems to encourage more spending. If they get a certain number, they can maybe get a discount, maybe they get a free meal, something like that. So I'll encourage everybody in general that's already buying from us, regardless of the demographics, to keep buying from us. So it's kind of ways to, I guess, sustain our current customer base. Another thing we could do is make personalized campaigns for different demographics that we seeing lower buying from, like married couples, married people. We could see you could maybe appeal to them with personalized marketing, as well as people with, higher incomes as well. Maybe some more luxurious kind of spending, some different kinds of things you can do as well. Maybe encourage some employees and people who are accustomed to cooking to maybe order out a little bit more. So certain marketing campaigns like that would be beneficial to kind of getting people who don't usually buy from us to buy from us a little more often, in order to kind of get our sales numbers in that regard up. So those are some recommendations I would give in order to make sure our sales remain consistent with our current buyers, as well as get some new buyers involved as well. So that's my conclusion.